Welcome to Study Time, a televised home learning program produced by Rwanda Education Board.
Hello students, welcome to the Learning Biology lesson. As you know, I'm called Teacher Hubert. I'm going to be taking you through the biology of thin year 3 and unit 10. And the unit is concerning about the skin and the homeostatic mechanism. And lesson 1, we're going to be discussing about the skin. If I talk about the skin, I mean the structure of the skin, its parts, and as well as we're going to talk about the functions of the skin. So students, let's go through the learning objectives of today. We have number 1 is concerning about drawing and labeling the parts of the human skin. As you know, our body's matter is normally covered by the skin. Objective number 2 is to explain the functions of the skin. So students, I think you are ready to start our lesson of today. Let's go through, make an introduction of the lesson. Today we are going to study the skin and its functions. As you see, we're going to study about the skin and its function. The skin, as you know, the skin is the largest external organ of the body, and it performs very many functions. I think you know it very well. The human skin covers the body, protecting and allying parts from physical trauma. So it means that the skin is responsible for protecting the underlying organs, the internal organs which are normally found inside. And I mentioned that the skin is acting as a barrier and it protects the skin from any mechanical injury. So the underlying organs must be protected by the skin. Entry of the pathogen, here we talk about the pathogen, the invasion of the pathogen. We talk about the invasion of pathogen. Student, I would like to ask you what a pathogen. A pathogen is a disease-causing agent. Any microorganism that can cause the disease is referred to as a pathogen. So the skin also plays an function of preventing the invasion of the pathogen, and as well as it prevents the body from water loss. Losing of water is also done by the skin. The skin is also important in thermoregulation. Talk about the word, there is 2 words, which is thermo and regulation. When you talk about thermo means heat, regulation means balancing. Our body temperature, student, has to be balanced. If I talk about balancing, it means that the body temperature must be not exceed 37 degrees Celsius. So we know that the normal body temperature is 37 degrees Celsius. 37 degrees Celsius. 37 degrees Celsius. That is the body temperature. So it means that 37 degrees Celsius should not go above and should not go below. So the skin does the function of thermoregulation, balancing the body temperature in our body. So that is thermoregulation, or regulating of the body temperature. Because as you know that once the body temperature is high, some of the metabolic processes in the body are going to be affected. I think you are following me. And once, take an example, I mentioned about the enzymes. Enzymes are denatured by high temperature. If I talk about denatured, they are destroyed by the high temperature. The skin is also equipped with a variety of sensory structures. If you talk about sensory organs, these are organs that are responsible for detecting any change in temperature. The monitor in terms of the touch. When you touch something, the skin feels the touch. When someone pinches you, you feel a pinch. Talk about the pressure. The skin is also able to detect the pressure, temperature, as well as we talk about pain. In addition, the skin cells it acts as manufacture precursors molecules that are converted to vitamin D. You know, when we talk about vitamin D, I think everybody knows what a vitamin D. We normally get it from the sunlight. And after exposure to ultraviolet light, so ultraviolet light is also manufactured by the skin. Let's go to the development of the lesson now. We've talked about the structure, talked about the function of the skin. We have seen how the skin does the function of regulating body temperature and how it manufactures vitamin C. Now the activity is using the figure 1 and figure 2, and you identify the main parts of the skin and their functions. We have to go and identify the structures and the functions of the skin. We talked about the main functions of the skin. We have talked about explain the importance of the skin in homeostatic regulation of body temperature. I know some of you don't know what is homeostasis. Homeostasis. As in biology, talk about homeostasis comes from two Greek words. Two Greek words. Homeo means similar. If it's something which is similar, then stasis and biology, it refers to a standstill. A standstill, something that is kept at a standstill. It doesn't change, it means there's at a standstill. Once the body is raised up, the skin tries by all means to lower down the body temperature. And once the temperature is also very low, the skin does the function of raising up the body temperature. I think you're understanding what I'm talking about. So that's what I talked about, explaining the importance of the skin in homeostatic regulation of body temperature. So it means how the skin plays a role in regulating or stabilizing the body temperature with regardless of the external factors. You may find it is too hot, but the skin does by all means to return back the body temperature to normal. And once it is too cold, I know some of you have ever went in an environment where it is too cold. The skin does the function of bringing back, raising back the temperature to a normal so that some of the enzymes will not become inactive or some of the proteins will not be destroyed. So the skin plays a function of regulating the body temperature. Let's have the structure of the skin, student. We are going to see, this is the skin. Our skin, you can see, there are many parts that makes up the skin. Here is the figure that shows the skin internally, not externally. This is the internal structure of the skin. The skin is made up of three major parts. We have the epidermis, we have the part which is called the dermis, and we have another one which is called the subcutaneous layer. And subcutaneous layer is also found in the dermis. We also have other parts. As you can see, this is something that is raised up, what you call hair follicle. We have other parts which are found, the parts that makes up the epidermis. We have the sweat pore. We have melanocytes. We have sensory receptors. We have capillaries. We have oil gland. Most of you, sometimes you find you have oil. That's why sometimes you have some oil in your skin. It is produced by the oil gland. We have erectile pili muscles. These are called erectile pili muscles. They are all these starting from here, starting from capillaries, oil gland, erectile pili muscles, free nerve endings, hair follicles, hair root. These are found in the dermis. So the parts that are found here in the dermis, we have these three. We start from the sweat pore. We have melanocytes. We have the sensory receptors. And starting from here, other parts are found in the dermis. Let's go through, student, what are the functions of these two parts I'm mentioning. I'm mentioning about the epidermis. I'm mentioning about the dermis. And even subcutaneous layer. Let's see their functions. What does it do to our body? As I mentioned, that the structure of the skin consists of outer layer, which is a protective layer. The protective layer protection is normally done by epidermis. And the inner layer or living layer, which is called the dermis. And the top layer of the epidermis is composed of dead cells. That's why I mentioned about the dermis is composed of living cells. Then the epidermis is made up of non-living cells. That's why most of the time the cells that are normally found in the epidermis are non-living. They are not living. But for the case of the dermis, which is the second to the epidermis, made up of the living cells. That's why I mentioned about the top layer of the epidermis is composed of dead cells. Dead cells which contains what you call keratin, and even the honey protein also makes up the hair and nails. Because our nails, to grow, there's a protein substance which is called keratin. And also, for the hair to be raised on our skin, also is made up of the hair and nails, which is the keratin. They are the part that makes up the epidermis, and they are made up of non-living cells. Or we call it to be, they are made up of dead cells. Sorry, they are made up of dead cells, not non-living cells. They are made up of dead cells. I talked about 90% of the cells in epidermis are keratinocytes, named because they produce a tough fibrous protein which is called keratin. As I mentioned it earlier, we have two types of proteins. We have fibrous proteins and we have globular proteins. Globular proteins plays a big role in metabolic processes. And then the fibrous proteins are the ones that are composed of the keratin. Here, let us emphasize on what you call keratin. So keratin is normally part which is almost 90% of the cells that are found in epidermis are made up of dead cells, and these are called keratinocytes. Keratinocytes are named because these cells that are found in epidermis are called keratinocytes because they are produced by a tough fibrous protein which is called keratin. And this protein is a main structural protein of epidermis, and it provides many of the skin protective properties. What makes the skin to become makes it to be more protective property? It is the presence of keratin. The presence of keratin makes our skin to perform a function of physical, I talk about physical protective process that makes the skin to act as a protective organ of our body. And if you remember, let me just, in summary, making about epidermis, remember that the skin is the first line of defense. It protects our body. What makes the skin to be protecting our body from entry of any pathogens, as I mentioned, or the loss of water. We talked about the presence of a tough membrane, which is called keratinocytes, which is formed by keratin, and the keratin makes the skin to be tough and hard, and enables the skin to perform the function of protective properties. Protective properties. Protective properties. Good. Let's go to the dermis. As I mentioned, the dermis is the second to epidermis. We have, unlike the epidermis, the dermis, or the lower layer of the skin, is enriched with blood vessels. So once you cut the first layer, which is epidermis, when you are doing a dissection, our skin, we have the first layer, which is called epidermis. The second one, which is called the dermis, is the layer or is a part of the skin that is composed of very many blood vessels. If you talk about blood vessels, I mean the capillaries and the veins, which are responsible to supply to the body with nutrients as well as with oxygen. Good. I think you are following me. Let's go through and with supply with blood vessels and even sensory nerve endings. Talk about sensory nerve endings. They are able to detect any change in the environment. That's why someone touches you, you feel someone is touching you. there are sensory nerve and there are sensory organs which transmit the nerve impulses from the receptor organ to the brain, and the brain is able to interpret what is happening. Someone can touch on your skin. You feel it. You know someone has touched, is touching my skin. So the information, that is because there is what you call sensory nerve endings. The epidermis also contains a relatively few cells compared to the epidermis. So it means when you make a comparison between the dermis and the epidermis, the dermis has less number of cells compared to the epidermis. The question is, why do we have less number of cells in the dermis compared to the epidermis? The reason is, in the dermis there are a number of blood capillaries, which reduces the number of cells that are present there. So I said there are a few cells compared to the epidermis. Instead, it is made up of many fibrous proteins and other large molecules. Let's talk about the main structure. The main structural component of the dermis is a protein called what you call collagen. Talk about the collagen. We talked about the major protein that is found in dermis is called keratin. Now the major component that is found in the dermis, it is called collagen. And it is a band of collagen molecules packed together throughout the dermis and accounting for the 3/4 of the dry weight of the skin. So the force of the dry skin is normally occupied by these collagen proteins. Let's go to the functions of the skin. I know some of you don't remember what are the functions of the skin. But let us first refresh back and we try to remind ourselves. I said there's also what you call a subcutaneous layer. And that is a layer which is also very important. I have not mentioned it there. And that subcutaneous layer, it is a layer which is made up of fatty materials, which is responsible to act as an insulator. Acting as an insulator, it is acting as a bad conductor of heat. That's also very important to prevent the heat escape from our body. Students, I think you do remember what I mentioned at the starting of our lesson. I said in our lesson of today, we have to talk about the structure of the skin. We have to talk about the functions of the skin. Do you remember that? Have you seen the parts of the skin? I have mentioned the two parts of the skin, epidermis, and the second one, the lower one, it is called the dermis. We talked about the epidermis plays a function of protective properties. And now we talk about the dermis. We said it is a part that is made up of blood capillaries or blood vessels, which are responsible to supply the skin with the nutrients as well as with oxygen. Because we know that these cells that are found in the dermis, they need oxygen to be supply them. And we also remember I talked about the epidermis is composed of dead cells, while in the dermis is composed of living cells. We talked about where the blood vessels are found, and we talked about the epidermis contains what we call keratin, and I said keratin is normally found in hair. That's that protein that makes your hair to grow. Find your hair is growing, that one is keratin. And also the nail to grow, it is keratin. So, and we talked about the protein which is normally found in the dermis is called collagen. Student, collagen, and which is very important to make the structures of the skin. Let's talk about the functions of the skin. There are a number of functions of the skin. I think I can give you a small time to review on the starting of the lesson. I talked about something protection. I talked something concerning about regulation of temperature, and so on and so forth. All right? So student, I would like to go back through now what are the functions of the skin. And you remember I told you the skin is the largest external organ of our body. All right? So the largest external organ of our body is the skin. Who can remind me the largest internal organ? So think about it. And meanwhile, in the meantime, I will give you the largest internal organ. The largest internal organ of our body is the liver. All right? The external is the skin, and now we're going to go through the functions of the skin. Here are the functions. I said the skin of mammals, like human, assists in homeostasis. If I go back on what is written on chalkboard, homeostasis, the word homeo means same. Then stasis at a standstill. So it makes our body temperature to remain constant, regardless of external factors. You may find outside is too cold, but the skin does a way of trying to regulate the body temperature, regardless external environment is cold. When it is too hot, what happens to you? Most of you sweat. Why do you have to sweat? You sweat in order to regulate the body temperature. When it is too cold, you find you are shivering. When you are shivering, automatically, you are trying to regulate the body temperature. All right? Let's go through. These things are called homeostasis. Keeping different aspects of the body constant. Keeping the different aspects of the body constant, regardless of external factors. You find the environment is too cold, but the skin does by all means regulate the body temperature. It is too hot. Maybe we are now in June. We are going to July. It will be too hot. What happens? You do sweat. You sweat through the skin pores, and in that way, you are regulating the body temperature. We bring the idea of what you call homeostasis. All right? Let's talk about, keeping different aspects of the body constant. These aspects include temperature. I know everybody knows our body temperature must not exceed 37 degrees Celsius. As I mentioned it on chalkboard, it is 37 degrees Celsius. Above that, it is abnormal. Below that, it is abnormal. The skin does by process of homeostasis, maintaining a constant, the temperature to be constant, not very high, not very low, regardless of external factors. Let's talk about it does this by reacting differently to hot and even to cold conditions. When it is too cold, the skin reacts differently. When it is too hot, the skin reacts differently. So that's the inner body temperature remains more or less constant. As I mentioned, the skin is an organ of protection. All right, is an organ of protection. The primary function of the skin. The primary function of the skin is to act as a barrier. It acts as a barrier. It doesn't allow some substance to enter. Water cannot enter in the skin. Some pathogen cannot enter into the skin. As I mentioned examples of pathogen, I talked about bacteria. I talked about other microorganisms cannot enter, so it acts as a barrier. The skin provides the mechanical impact and pressure, variation in temperature. The temperature can vary in such a way. So microorganisms and other microorganisms cannot enter. Radiations. That's why the sunlight cannot penetrate and enter into your skin. The skin is acting as a radiation. And even other chemicals. You can be in an environment where there are chemicals, but these chemicals cannot enter into your body. Students, let's go through to the home assignment. We went through our lesson. We have seen the function of the skin. We have seen the parts of the skin. Now, before I leave my classroom of today, I have to leave with you with a home assignment. And you have to do it. And I think in the next onset of the next lesson, I will be able to give you the right answers. These are the home assignment. We have number 1, state 3 functions of the skin. State 3 functions of the skin. Number 2, what is the importance of melanin that is found in the skin? What are the importance of melanin that is found in the skin? You remember I talked about melanin, and you know what you call skin pigment. Melanin, that makes your skin to be black. Absence of melanin, what do you suffer, students? You suffer from what you call, you become an albino. Talk about an albino, that is lack of skin pigment, all right? And you know, if you are lacking skin pigment, most of the time, obviously, the radiations from the sunlight, ultraviolet radiation will enter into your skin very easily. Number 3, compare the structure and functions of epidermis and the dermis of the skin. You compare the structure and functions, as I mentioned, compare the structure and functions of the epidermis and the dermis of the skin. We have the last one. The figure below illustrates the structure of the skin. The figure below shows a section through the skin. Identify the parts labeled by the letters from A up to I. That is A, that is A, that is B, that is C, that is D, that is D, that is E, F, G, H, and I. So you have to go through that exercise, and I think we are ending our lesson. I wish you a blessed day and stay safe. See you in the next lesson.